I first started fishing at Brennick nearly 30 years ago. At the time I was on a caravan holiday and I was staying at Bala, and I made the trip up to this lake 2 or 3 times in the fortnight. I loved the place then, I love it now, and I fished every year since. In the early days I knew nothing about stillwater fly fishing. All I'd got to work on was a programme I'd seen on the television by Jackie Charlton, and he spent the day with Bob Church, who at the time was a big noise in stillwater trout fishing, and he fished at Rutland Water. For the most part I fished with muddler minnows, and if the fish weren't on the surface I didn't catch. It was as simple as that. But over the years I've managed to build up a few more approaches. I've had some cracking days on Brennick, and I've also had some dog days where no one else seemed to catch either. You get to Brennick either from Cerrig-y-Drudion or from Denbigh. It's 4 miles from Cerrig and 13 miles from Denbigh, and the road you use is the B4501, whichever direction you come from. The first time I see the lake, every time I go, I feel intimidated by its size. I'm in awe of the place initially, and I wonder how I can possibly find fish in such a big expanse of water. But already by the time I get to this point, my approach is changing. I'm already starting to think how I'll be fishing. I'm looking at the direction of the wind and making my choice about which part of the lake I'll be going to. By the time I get to that sign, I've almost travelled 70 miles. So obviously I'm keen to go to Brennick, and I find it worth it. This is a picture looking across the lake. In the middle you can see the fish cages where they bring the fish on, and on the far side the Llyn bank. This is looking across the tower into Tower Bay, and that's the dam side. Back again looking across to the Llyn bank. This sign shows the time that, as it says, that the gates are locked. So if you're fishing around about the visitor centre, you need to be well away by that time. If you're fishing on the other side, it doesn't matter because the gates aren't locked. But it gives an indication of the sort of time you should be finishing fishing. Again, that's looking across to the tower. And as I say, already by this point, I'm beginning to settle down. My confidence is growing, and the excitement's mounting for the day. This first entrance is for the fisherman's car park. So if you're fishing from a boat, or maybe you're fishing at the dam end of the lake, this is where you'd park for the day. It's very quiet today, but some days the car park's really busy. The bike hire is a new thing for me. I don't remember seeing it last year, but maybe I just didn't come into this car park. And right next to the fisherman's car park you'll find the general car park. And I'll take you right down to the bottom. That's the visitor centre, and I'll show you where you can buy your tickets if you come late in the day. A full day ticket costs £17.50 at the moment. It's really disconcerting if you put £17.50 into a machine like that. When you press the green button, there's always a second where nothing happens and you think, I've put £17 in and I won't be getting my ticket. But it's always works for me. That's the visitor centre. There's a cafe, there's toilets, and there's an exhibition space. And this part is by the lakeside. The door on the front is the shop where you buy your tickets, the self-fishing tackle, and the black door to the left is the fish cleaning room. And that's another view looking across to Tower Bay. Plenty of boats available today, and it's a real Brennick sky, very moody. That's the jetty. with the safety boat at the end. And that's the safety boat on one of its runs around the lake. It does it round about every hour just to check that the boats are working and safe. And that's the same boat right at the other end of the lake in the Brennick arm. That's just a general view by the visitor centre. Driving away from the car park now, to the right is a children's adventure playground, but no photographs for obvious reasons. That's the Brennick Sailing Club, and as we turn left, you'll see for the first time the area that they call the bays. And this is a really popular fishing area. It's popular because it can be quite productive, and the other good thing is that you can always be within 50 yards of your car. So you're not doing a lot of walking or carrying. There's one of the gates that gets locked at night, and that's the only exit there that's available these days. There is an exit further up, but it's sealed off at the moment, and I'm not sure whether it'll open again. We're just carrying on driving around the bays. And once you get to this part of the lake, it's not looking at its best at the moment. There's been a lot of forestry over the last year or two. This used to be all wooded, but now the trees have gone, and it'll take 2 or 3 years for the smaller trees to build up. And I'm going to stop by this fence, and I want to show you an access point for another piece of lake that's quite well hidden. You can just see a darkened area under there. That's a path, and it takes you to a point, and it's looking across the water from a different angle. It's that point. And that can be an exciting place. I fished there 20 years ago, and it's the coldest I've ever been when I was fishing, and the month, late June. This is another access point. It's not heavily fished, but you're fishing into deep water, right from the edge, but I've not seen much caught there. And as I pull in here, you get a view looking across the Brennick arm to the parking place where you leave your car when you fish in the nature reserve side of the lake. That happens to be my favourite part of the water. I mentioned an exit that's closed. It has been closed for the last couple of years. Will it reopen next year? I have no idea. And from here, we're driving deeper into the Brennick arm. This is a sharp right-hand bend. That track that goes ahead of you goes back to the main road. When you go down this road, there's a nice feature. There's a bridge over a stream, and it's quite a nice picnic area. And as we carry on, we'll come to a really sharp hairpin bend, and again the track to the left takes you back to the main road. If you see any families cycling up this road, do them a favour, just tell them that this is the way to the nature reserve, and it's a really difficult track to cycle on, especially for children. Just to the right here, there's an access point. It's quite often fished here. I've never fished because it tends to be much flatter than the rest of the lake. By the time the waves get here, the water seems calmer. I'd rather be fishing on a choppier water. This is the parking area for the nature reserve, and quite literally, it's the end of the road. Before the construction of the dam and the flooding of the area, that road went right across, and I'll show you later on where it comes out at the other side. So this is the way that you walk across to the other side, and keep about 20 yards away from the water. It's quite tempting to follow the water, but it's very messy and muddy. There's a marker post there, and just to the left of that marker post is a wooden plank that helps you across one of the deeper streams. And that's the view looking back to the car park. Once you get to this point, it's easy to just follow the track. The point that you see there is where the road comes out again, and I always call that the Submerge Road. That point can be excellent fishing. The wooded point on the other side is the area that I showed you earlier when I stopped by the fence. This is always worth a cast, and it's regularly fished. And the whole of that bank can be productive. When the water's a little low, you can wade it no problem, and depending on which way the wind's blowing, you can wade it up or down. Step and cast is a good idea. Past those two trees there's an inlet, and what that means is there's deep water right next to the bank, and if you're fishing from that gravel bank you can be into deep water straight away. I love this part of the lake, and right up round that corner you can fish, again depending on which way the wind's blowing. That's the gravel bank, and you can just make out how quickly the water goes deep. And it's looking back to where the road comes out. That point I've caught lots of fish on Viva, I've caught them on floating line and sunk line. It's also quite good with a gold-ribbed hare's ear with a gold head and maybe a black pennel type fly. That's panning round to where you leave the car. The whole of this area, which is called the Brennick Arm, is popular with boats. And you know that if you're watching boats fish through it, go back to where they started and fish through it 2 or 3 times, that they're actually getting chances or catching fish. I fished there a number of times. It's not my kind of fishing. I like to wade deep and have a free back cast. It's a little bit awkward there, and as you come round, I don't think I've ever seen anyone fishing there. Not sure what the water's edge is like. It may be deep, or it may be just a problem because there's trees right up to the water. As I say, that's not my kind of fishing. And there's the point I showed you, an access point earlier. You're into deep water straight away, but as I said, it doesn't seem to get fished that often, and I've not seen anyone catch there. But like everywhere else, it's worth a try. And that's taking you around to the point again, and then back to my favourite part of the lake. And you could say that this is unspoilt beauty, but you'd be absolutely wrong. In the first place, the lake is man-made, and in the second place, as you go around the corner and see some of the rock formations, it's basically a quarry that's been man-made. But the combination of the water and the activity, it makes it a lovely area. And interestingly, it's an area that no one but fishermen will see. To see the rock formations, you've actually got to be in the water. If you're looking from right across the other bank, it's too far, so you wouldn't get any detail. And I think these features are lovely. And at the right time of year, when the heather's blooming, they'll be even nicer. You need to be a little bit careful because some of those rocks are really sharp. I call this area the Valley of Peace and Tranquility. Again, it's an area that I love. And it's interesting that when you walk through this area, things do feel very calm. And for some reason, the wind doesn't seem to blow as much on that area as others. There is some protection from trees, but the way the wind drops doesn't seem to be explainable by the trees. This is the road that goes through the Valley of Peace and Tranquility, and you can see right across to the far bank. And just over the brow, that road goes into the lake again and disappears. I've never been able to trace where it comes out at the other side. This is almost at the point on the nature reserve, and this is one area that you need to be really careful when you wade in. Most areas you can trip up, you can slip in the mud. There's plenty of rocks and boulders that you can stumble over. But this area particularly, it's been quarried, and there's certain bits just in this bay where if you wade out too far, the rock formation drops 6 or maybe 8 feet, and if you take a step too far, your hat would be floating. So take care in that area. So as well as the water and the rock formations, you've got the sailing boats from the club. And I think that adds nicely to the overall experience. And we're panning around there. The other side of that wood is the visitor centre, and there you can see the sailing club itself. And as we pan around again, that's the area that I referred to earlier as the bays. And you can see where the road comes round. That's the exit where that car's going up. And here's another of those rock formations. It's a lovely pattern, and you see them either out of the water like that or underwater. As I say, I don't seem to see those in other lakes that I go to. That's another rock formation on the other side. Again, when the sun's shining, I think it's absolutely lovely. And here we've almost reached the end of the road. Again, looking right across the lake, and you can see it's quite some distance. It's a big expanse of water. This area right at the end of the road is quite popular, and I've seen people catch there quite regularly. If you go right, it takes you to the area where the rocks are that I've showed you. If you go left, it takes you further onto the nature reserve, and all of it can be really productive water. We're now heading left from that road, and it's deeper into the nature reserve. Again, that's looking over to the Llyn bank. I call this the shale bank, and it can be really productive. Right from that point that you can see there, you can fish right through, all down this shale bank, and you can pick a fish up at any time. I've had success with the floating line, intermediate, sunk line, whichever. I've had 1 or 2 nice fish off this area. That's looking up to where the road comes into the lake, and again you can fish right through there. Just be a bit careful, the bottom can be a bit rocky and lots of trip points. This bay is quite popular in the summer when people fish the dry fly. That's looking over to the Llyn bank and the road that comes in on the other side. That's Gull Island. Later in the year it's absolutely heaving with gulls. There's 1 or 2 there now, but later in the year the noise is absolutely deafening and it never stops all day long. This is the nature reserve bank, and again, anywhere up this bank you can catch fish. It's not fished particularly well for me over the last couple of years, but previous to that it was very productive. Right in the middle of the picture there's some tufts of grass just by the waterside, and that's one of the hot spots. Anywhere around there's some deeper water. Static booby can be really productive on there. You can see the fence there. It isn't heavily fished past there, but people do fish it, and again it does seem to attract some interest in the summer with dry fly. Just the other side of that fence there's a path that takes you over the hill, and you can get back to the car park that way. It's quite a steep climb. Because of its distance from the car park, this area isn't heavily fished. You might find 2 or 3 anglers on this side, but quite often you'll be fishing on your own, and that's something I like. This is looking from the fence over towards the productive point. And here, I was going to film me eating a Kit Kat at this point, but even though I bought it in mould that day, I forgot to take it with me. So really it's just about a contemplative moment, and it's just about enjoying and sitting and listening to the waves. Very often when I fish at Brennick I'll sleep in the afternoon, and it's so relaxing, and you just hear the waves and gradually you drift off. But you've got to be careful because quite often you'll wake up and your face is burnt on one side, so try and avoid that. As I said at the start of the film, I've come for 30 years. I've loved it. I've had some terrible days, but I've had some great days. And I keep coming back. I particularly like fishing the floating line, and even in the early part of the year you can have success with the floating line. But if you're doing that, if you're using a floating line early on, you need weighted flies. I often fish a team of flies. I may fish a Viva on the point. I like a gold-ribbed hare's-ear, as I mentioned earlier, and especially if I need to get down with a gold head on it. I like black pennel type flies, and again a gold head can be productive. We've moved away from the nature reserve bank now. We're back in the corner of the bays. And because it's so near the road, again, this is a really popular area. And you'll quite often see fishermen right in this corner. And you can see from these two guys, it's not the most comfortable fishing, but it must be productive. We're looking over to the Llyn bank and looking at the wind farm. And people have got different views about the wind farm. But I think in a certain light, they look really nice. We're moving away now from the bays, and we're going to a different part of the lake. This is the only exit, as I said earlier, and we're now onto the main road, the B4501, and we're turning left. On the bonnet of the Volvo is a mixture of Brennick dust and volcanic dust from Iceland. That's the main entrance to the visitor centre. We've passed the Llyn entrance on the right hand side, and we're turning left now, and we're heading towards Tower Bay. And this is an attractive area. There's lots of bird life, even in the village. And this looks as though I'm driving quite quickly. I wasn't. It's a video effect. Once you go past that house, this is a really steep climb. Don't take your caravan with you. And this is the last house on that road. Once you get past that house, you go past the first exit to the left, and it's the second exit that you want. The first one takes you into the woods and you get lost. This one takes you down towards Tower Bay. And Tower Bay is a really popular area of the lake. And again, you can get your car right next to where you fish. So it's really convenient. Once you get to here, if you turn right, it takes you down the Llyn bank, and if you turn left, it takes you to the car park on Tower Bay. If you want good information about what's happening with the fishing, look in the box. People put the returns in. Some people give good information, and even on a terrible day, you'll find that someone's caught 6. Quite often they'll tell you what fly they've used, so it's really good intelligence that you can get from that box. There's 1 or 2 of those boxes scattered around the lake. And this is Tower Bay, and that's the tower. I always feel intimidated by that tower. It's so big and cold, and I don't know, I should really go out in a boat and touch it and hug it and get to know it. A real Brennick sky in the background. This wasn't quite so late as it looks. But if it was, it should have been gone by now. So we're back to the entrance and we're heading off on the road towards the Llyn bank. But we stop very quickly and just look back and enjoy the scenery. This is Tower Bay. People fish right from those cars right into this corner. This guy here is fishing a static booby. It can be really productive there. People catch on lures, they catch on dry fly, and they catch on nymphs. It's a really horrible wind for this area, so that's why there's no one fishing today. This is back on the road heading towards Llyn. Shortly, I'll show you some access points through the wood. This was amazing, this. As I drove past, I just saw this, and it's a swallow, and it had caught one of its claws in the barbed wire. Now, I've never seen a swallow close up, but when you actually do, they're absolutely beautiful. The breast is almost the same colour as a robin, and what I thought was black feathers is iridescent blue. Absolutely beautiful. This is a quarry area that you're not allowed to fish for obvious reasons, but it is popular around here with the boats. We've moved into the wood now, and this is an area that I've never fished. I don't know it, but as you drive past, there usually are 1 or 2 cars parked here. In years gone by, I think it was quite popular for brown trout. That's an access point, and this is where that access point leads to. But I don't know how deep the water is. So whether you can wade deep and start fishing, I don't know. And 1 or 2 general shots. It is a really attractive area. And that's looking from the start of the Llyn bank up round the wood. Again, this is an area that I don't fish, but it's a nice area. I fished this many years ago. There used to be a hut. If the weather was terrible, you could shelter in the hut. And I fished off the top of that cliff into deeper water, and that was quite productive. This is looking north along the Llyn bank, and again, you can fish anywhere and you can pick fish up. This is looking south, right towards the dam, and what you'd want now is a boat passing by. And just by chance, here we go. The wind today was from the north and it was a perfect drift right along the Llyn bank. Not brilliant for fishing, but the drift is just right along the bank. And here the guy picked a fish up, fish about 1.5 pounds. The last time I saw him today, he'd got 4, so he'd done better than most today. There was very little caught this day because the wind was against us. And this is looking from one of my favourite points. That bay can be productive, and again, you just need to move through it. A lot of people fish static on the points, and I often fish there for quite a long time. But it's also good to move. And this is looking over to the nature reserve. And that's the area that I talked about earlier. And this is moving towards where the sunken road comes into the lake. All of it productive, all of it good fishing. And we're coming to the point there. And that's where the road comes in. So we're back to the Llyn bank. And that's looking right over into the corner of the nature reserve. This is one of the parking areas. You can usually get parked without difficulty. And that's looking over to the entrance of the Llyn area. There's a bay there that is quite popular, and where that car is, that's one of the most heavily fished areas round the lake. Access is easy, and it's obviously popular. And I'm filming now from round about the stone circle, which I believe is a burial ground from centuries ago. And you can just see the edge of it to the right. This chap told me that he got snowed in right at the start of the season. Had to wait for 3 guys to come and push him out. But he still carried on fishing later on. Again, filming, looking north from the stone circle. That's the end of the fishing here. This is how you access the Llyn bank from the other side. So you can either come from Tower Bay or come in this way. And the view from the top of this hill is absolutely lovely. And for some reason, if I'm coming to the lake in the morning from this end, I don't feel intimidated by the size of it. It's peculiar really, but we're all a little bit quirky. I think that's a lovely view. One of the nice things about Brennick is that over the years access has become more and more open. You could always go through that gate and take your car part of the way, but there was a gate that was locked a bit further on and you couldn't go any further. A few years ago it was opened up so that you can literally drive right from this end right up to Tower Bay. We've moved back to the main car park now. I'm just going to show you the area around the visitor centre. So that's the fish cages where they grow the fish on. There's a couple of men working there today. That's the dam. And this is the area by the dam, and it is popular and it is very productive at times. I don't fish it, I like to be out in the wilds and away from people. But it is heavily fished, and as I say, a lot of fish are caught out of this area. And this is on the way home. And I thought what I'd do was try and catch the sun setting over the mountains at the south end of the lake. And these are still shots which are quite nice. And it shows the kind of setting that Brennig lies in. And then I looked round and I saw what the skyline was like. And the sunset that night, just when you thought everything had finished, was absolutely beautiful.